With this, we begin with our first speaker for today, Dr. Bhuvan Vikram. He is currently serving as a superintendent archaeologist in Bhubaneswar, and we also know him as the person who's working very closely with Dr. Shivam Tripathi. I wonder if Shivam is around. Shivam is working on the Kalinjar Fort and the water management system of the Kalinjar Fort, and Bhuvan is working very closely with him in order to find out what this system at Kalinjar is. I do not know whether he'll be speaking about Kalinjar today, but he certainly intends to give us an idea on the relationship and the architecture between the tangible and the intangible.
Thank you very much, organizers, Ms. Sharma and my all the scholars before me. Here I am going to present something with relation to, to archaeology, and we'll talk about some structures that we read in literature and what we find in archaeology, basically. So my talk is divided into three parts. That's need for shelter and the concept of the space, that how it evolved. That is a very basic thing. The concept of city and its layout, how it is referred in text, and what we find, the ground reality. And then the temple as the hub center of the life. Shelter is a very basic requirement, more or less like, one of the biological requirements. So in the initial, all the natural cavities and overhangs that they were the first resting places. They provided needed shelter to the human beings in the earlier. But as the human beings evolved in their survival techniques, they gained knowledge, and when they learned the secrets of agriculture from the nature, how to grow seeds, how to grow cereals and they had to settle down in the plains, and that their coming to the plains required the structured shelters that because there was no protection provided by the nature from any outcrops or the shelters and cavities. So now once this structured shelters came up, so they differed in material. That material for the construction also depends upon the geology, geography, and ecology of the area in which that construction is taking place, and even the sizes also were constrained by the use of and the availability of the material, and also the technical skill sets they had so far achieved. The structured shelters, what they actually gave, that the freedom of use of space, and then when they structured the spaces, shelters, houses, that is, then they could experiment with the space. The concept of a space was born, how they could, and that gave them a liberty to expand in terms of spaces. And then the use of space also was defined, that this particular area to be used as for a particular activity. So we can get different activity areas in a small house complex. And then we come to, when we get this different activity areas related to the plan, to the space, we also get the terms like different space, the sacred space, the profane, the religious, non-religious, and so on. Anyway, this is a very long story, very long part, and all these developments took the most of the human past. When we come down where these developments, we start finding the remains of the houses and all. So we find that houses of the common people, like the common houses, were they did not differ much in the basic plan of it, although the geography and the cultural background that affected some minor changes in the plans, but that again the difference was due to the variation in space use pattern. The first constructions that we can think of, they were in perishable materials, whatever the nature provided, and that was, and it was very easy for them to achieve their desired shapes, and they could experiment with that, all those perishable material, which was more malleable than stone and brick. And why they did not use stone and brick was not because they stone was not available, or but because they did not have the technology to cut the stones to their desired purpose. And then in the areas where stones were not available at all, they experiment with making something like a stone, and then the bricks were born. But the initial shapes that they had experimented for a very long period, they tried to copy those same format into the stone, and we find we can get some correlation between those. The Hutmans, and on the other side is the one of the earliest caves that we consider, the Lomas Rishi, and the facade and a tribal hut from the Todas. They bear very similarity, and then it is also the shape came to be known as the wagon vault because of the wagons that were prevalent in those times, or maybe later.
Which part of the country is that from?
This is from Toda. I mean, there is a tribe, Toda tribes. It is from south, Tamil Nadu, Nilgiris.
Okay.
When at the micro level, the space distribution was fine. But when we come to the period when the cities developed, large settlements came up, then also we find there is some sort of space demarcation for the settlements also. So there are certain texts that talk about cities and how they are to be laid out. So we have some references in Arthashastra, Milanapano, Mahabharata, Ramayana, and few other texts of Buddhism and this Jainism. But the major stress, more or less, was on the evolved concept of a space and properties that they associated with different directions and perhaps the wind directions of the local area. The model, this is based on Arthashastra, which gives very elaborate description of a city and where, what community, what trade, what sort of classes are to be separated out, spread out in this. So, but in this, we see this empty is the main temple of the city, and Royal Palace RP has to be on the north side. In the center, the temple occupies the space, and then there are different activity areas which have been relegated. So this shows that in a city, different communities were to be located in a different pockets, and perhaps it was with the direction of the wind, that smoke areas or other things which produce some certain odors, they should not come to the habitation area. And then there also there was some sort of hierarchy was also there. So the best locations were given to the higher classes in the society, and there was some consideration for the poor areas were for the lower people. And also the shops and other trade materials were also located according to their importance in the city and for the life. The primary quality of a city was it should have storage spaces, well provided stores for edible things and artillery, etc. But important thing in this plan, this is somewhat ideal thing. It has got 3 modes, and on the there is the DS is Dharmshala or the temple sort of thing on the outside of the city near the gates. Now, when we see the early cities that we have explored, we have some knowledge of. We don't find any city which matches this ideal city in plan. This is Aichatra in Bareilly district, Sankisha in near Kannauj, Raja Vishalkagarh in Bihar, Sok, Shravasti, Mathura and Shishupalgarh. We see that most of the cities do not conform in plan to what Arthashastra speaks, but only Shishupalgarh, which is late or contemporary to Arthashastra, that somehow conforms to the city planning of Kautilya. So these all the cities are earlier than Kautilya, so they do not conform. But still, we would like to investigate whether other details that Kautilya mentioned about the layout inside the city, whether they are true or how far they are true. We find, so there is a case study about Aichatra. We have extensively worked with very valuable contributions from IIT Kanpur. Aichatra was very old. I mean, it was excavated for many years, but from 2003-4 onward, I've been associated with this project, and from 2005 onwards, IIT Kanpur was initiated, was brought in, and we worked in tandem for a very long time. And so what we get, this is the GPR. This is the result of GPR done by Shravanti. So we tried to locate certain, we tried to explore certain locations where we could not excavate. What is there in those locations and whether those things conform to the plan of Kautilya. So this is almost, the city is not square, but however in the center part we get the palace area, and all these structures were found in with the help of GPR. And near those, the two dots are the main temples in the city. These two temples are the two dots, and in the center there is the residential complex, that is the royal palace perhaps. Then the Dharmshala in the temple.
This place is, where is it right now, present location?
Bareilly district, near Amla. So when we see that, okay, the king's palace and the temples are there in the center. So far, so good. But when we see what is outside the fortification walls. So Kautilya says every gate should have some 100 dhanush away temple and dharmshala. Here what we find, this is the western gate outside. This is the western gate, and immediately outside on the street we get temples, remains of temples, and some large structures here, which are definitely not residential or private houses, rather public structures. So this we confirmed at 2-3 other gates. So now two attributes, at least of mentioned in Arthashastra, are confirmed here. Another, this is the gate, and lot many statues are found there. They were found there in 1940s. So again, this gate concept, the Bhat Mangala, yes, please.
Yeah. What is the dimension? What do you expect? Dimension of the
site.
Walled area.
Walled area is, the perimeter is about 5.5 kilometers. One dimension of the north-south is 2 kilometers, and east-west is like 1.5 kilometers. Now we come down to what material we get and how can we correlate it with the architecture type, how we conjecture, because what we get in excavation is simply the plan, and that to the base plan of structures. So we try to match it with what the villages still do have. We have got the storage bins here, the storage pattern in the village, and what we get in the mud storage. These are the mud, post holes and a mud, a circular hut, a small storage bin, and this is what we get in the modern times in the villages, in the nearby villages. So we also try to study the house patterns that we actually encounter in our excavations, and the room sizes are very small. So when we studied this in the two villages, they randomly selected two houses, and we studied the house plans and the dimensions of the rooms and other things. So we find the covered area is very less, rooms are very small, and they are practically used for storages. So in this also we see what we find in archaeology is, I mean, very right. The chambers are very small, and there are storage bins inside, and the rest, it appears to have been open area or veranda type structure. So in that cowshed area, that's all veranda with a thatched roof. So that is the open, and that is the there is no as such the space for living in. It is in the open areas that that people live.
So again, sorry, what is the room size roughly?
2.5 meters. It's very small, 2.5 meters by 2 meters, something like that. So these are the room sizes that we get, and then inside we get some ring patterns, so that the storage areas, here you can see, this is the entire pit is like 5 meters, so inside there is a wall area.
So the room size?
This is the room, this is the room.
Can you kindly go back to the previous slide? So that house belongs to a prosperous farmer or a poor farmer?
This is the economic level of the village is almost the same. There is not very rich people out there. The entire area is very poor. This is average. So we have averaged out 2 random houses in this. They have got few cows, a small khet. So it is like a middle order villager. These are the actually excavated remains of Aichatra with pits, with the storage pits and the walls. Now when we, this is about the domestic architecture. Now the city must also have some kind of temples. So the temples actually are structured structures, but before that, before they come in structure, there are indications that there were some kind of temples, maybe in perishable material, that and that kind of temples we don't get in excavation, but we get something on the coins and some other representations. These are 2 drawings of coins. On the other side there are the names written, but on this side you can see a deity standing within an enclosed area. So perhaps this is the beginning of the temple architecture, that some kind of prakar or a walled area should be constructed, and inside that deity is to be housed. So these are 2 coin types that I am showing here.
Which period are they from?
These are like 200 BC.
So what was the dynasty ruling in those?
Mitra dynasty. Mitra dynasty of Panchal region. And in architecture we find this huge temple, but the superstructure is not there. It is only the plinth area, and this is time frames, different time frames in this.
The temple is later.
No, this is early temple. This is one of the this is I mean 1st century AD to 2nd century AD, not with the coins, but later, but certainly pre-Gupta. This is only the plinth area, and there is another temple on the other side of the royal palace, the small temple, the slightly smaller, but these 2 temples are like raised on platforms. The plinth has been raised, so that gives us a reason. We were talking earlier that why they were put on a higher pedestal. What was the need of it? So over this there was a superstructure, very huge, that we can see later here. But these were a different kind of architecture that they used. The crisscross, they made checkerboard pattern of the walls filled with earth, and then again a second terrace and third terrace. So from the ground the boxes rise to the top floor, receding in height. The plan of it, this is the Aichatra plan, the top plinth level, and then the actual temple plan. And we are very fortunate in this near Kanpur, in the Ghatampur area, many brick temples are there. There is a cluster of brick temples which somehow post-date Aichatra. There's another temple near Ghatampur, that's Bhitargaon. That plan is slightly different than this. Then that Bhitargaon temple appears to be which followed this temple, because it has got another porch added to it in front of this. This is Bhitargaon. This is Bhitargaon temple, and this is here. So somewhat this kind of temple must have been here at Aichatra on top of this plinth. This is certainly the beginning of temple architecture here, because not only because the plinth and the plan of the temple is suggests that it is earlier than the Bhitargaon. But one more thing which is very interesting is this temple, in the temple, mostly in the Shiva temples, the tradition of putting images of Ganga and Yamuna started, and we know that they normally are situated on the door jambs on either side. But here, they were not on the door jambs. These were not the small Ganga Jamuna figurines. These are actually now placed in National Museum. But these life-size, almost life-size figurines were placed at the lower level, at the first entry level of the steps from where those steps are run. Here we have got the remains of the Kurma Vahini, Yamuna in the niche, quite below the proper temple. So again, this is one indication that this temple was very much the forerunner of all the Gupta temples, where the Ganga Jamuna is normally placed at the door jamb.
How far is this site from Kanpur?
Which site? Aichatra. Aichatra from Kanpur, it may be around 300 kilometers in district Bareilly. But Bhitargaon is quite nearby. Again, coming back to Arthashastra's division of population inside city. Yes, please.
Aichatra did not have statues of Ganga or something like that. There were
The statues of Ganga Jamuna actually belong to Aichatra. So I'm showing the Aichatra period. Only Bhitargaon is for the superstructure kind of thing, how what the temple might have looked like. But coming back to Arthashastra plan, how the different classes of people are located in the city. So we actually tried to see it in the modern village, nearby village, whether there is a mixture of all the classes or there is a separation of it. So we find definitely there is some separation, and there is some kind of directional location also. They are in the Brahmins on this side and the Vaishyas and others, the lower caste on the other side. So that is clear, but since the village is growing up and it is a living village, so it is changing a little bit according to the availability of land, but it somehow conforms to the ancient model. In the Aichatra town itself, we tried to locate different areas, the marketplaces, the main temple we have identified, some sort of manufacturing areas for the stones, which and also the iron smelting areas. We tried to locate all this and there, but these are, since it is not the square plan, they do have certain linkages to the directional values which were placed in Arthashastra, but they do somehow conform there. Now we come to what are the evidences of the structures that we get, and how those structures might have been constructed in those days. So the top photographs are like artistic representation, but these are the impressions that these are the actual material that we get from our excavations, which tell us about the superstructures of the and the mode of construction. There is the burned clay with bamboo marks on them, reed marks on them, that is on the walls or on the roof. The clay was applied and that got burned, and the structure was basically made up of wood, bamboo and clay. Another here, how the sticks or the bamboos are used, and what type of information we get from the excavations. So these also very nicely conform. Finally, there is there's a concept of putting finials, or the shikharas that we now call the metal shikharas, and if you see that Taj Mahal also, in that big finials are there with lot many pots kept here. In this you can see that is a very functional it has got a function to perform. Actually, in the older structures it had a function to perform, but now by the time the Mughals and the Taj Mahal was created, perhaps it only became an embellishment. It became an architectural member, but because it had lost its functional value. In this, you see this, all the bamboos are tied together, and from there, to stop the seepage of water, the pot has been put inverted. And similar kind of pots, here this is again the finial, and this is also this similar kind of depiction on Sanchi Stup. And what we get here, these are the architectural, the functional pieces of architecture which were utilized there, and this is also the same finial which were used, and later on these things have become embellishment for the architecture because they had lost their functional things. So religious edifices and society, how far they match, how far the society influences the temples, and how temples influence the society is a basically continuum. Sometimes temples influence the society, and sometimes, but most of the time societies basically influence the temples. But when we see the constructions of temple, it is architecture. There was, in ancient times, the measurement was not there. Weight measurement was regularized, but linear measurement was never a standard basically. So all that measurement was from the proportions. So like in Harappa we see 1:2:3 or 1:2:4 sort of proportions, but here all the measurements were proportioned on the human body, Hastaman, Angulman or Vitasta, all this. And then the entire temple was conceived in the form of human body, because that was the perfect model available to us. They balanced and proportionate. So entire the temple elevation as well as the temple plan, they were likened to the human body, and likewise the different parts were named. But this form of temple is very late in evolution. Similarly, the plan also is proportioned and equated with the human body. But as I said, these plans of the temple are very late in the evolution of temple architecture. So we need to see how the religious ideas got translated into some sort of architecture, whether it is perishable or non-perishable. Nature worship, or the tree worship, perhaps is the earliest that we get. Even in the this is Harappan seals which show the tree deity, or man is standing between the two twigs, two branches of peepal tree, and another there is a man with some sort of crown standing up among the tree leaves. And in the Buddha's time again there is a peepal tree being worshipped as a symbol of Buddha himself. And then this is the modern time that the peepal tree, and there are so many trees that we worship. Similar, that is one spot, one tree, some markers which have been made into some kind of worship place. Some natural structures, that is perhaps the earliest sort of a structure that the man created. That is a hunting trap for trapping animals, and that somehow those drawings, maybe there is a sheer coincidence, but similar kind of drawings are there, the architecture. This is sheer coincidence, but this the earliest structure that we can think of is this is purposely made for hunting. But this is, the top one is the earliest temple, as of we know that the temple number 17 is Sanchi. From this simpler temple to Konark, that is the epitome of temple architecture.
One you see behind it, was that really inspired by Roman architecture?
This one,
It is behind that. You see those columns there?
and those columns there, those columns is a Chaitya hall basically. So
It looks very Roman.
it could be. See, that is it's a debatable things. But here this temple format is very simple: a square cell and then a small porch supported by veranda with a flat top. But from flat top to high shikharas, the travel of temple architecture has been influenced by many factors which we need to take into account. This is Sanchi. This one is the Dashavatar temple Devgarh, and then finally the Konark. The roof that is rising up. So what made the roof rise up? Was there any connection between the growing hierarchy in the society? Is there any connection between the dominant class and the dominated class here, or the relative hierarchy of different classes in the society that we see the shikhara, the gradual heights of the shikhara from flat top to the highest point, and then the other parts are relatively smaller and lower. And similarly, there is another example which I need to cite here. The Brihadeshwar temple and the Arunachaleshwaram temple here. They are very similar in plan basically. Even in architecture they are much similar, but the difference is in the main temple. Here the temple is quite high and the gopuram are smaller, and here the temple is small but the gopurams are very high and they also increase on the number. Can it be related to the difficulties in social mobility? All these social aspects need to be considered here. Rigidity in the social mobility, the distances between the classes or class variations, the royal and the mercantile class, all these could have been responsible for such type of variations, because canonically there is nothing to differentiate between these and that. What is the relative what is the relationship between the shikhara height and the gopuram height? Why? Because the point of veneration is the garbhagriha, not the gopuram. But gopuram is taller. It becomes taller gradually. Perhaps if we see the history, the sovereign power, the royal power is diminishing in is somewhat diminishing, whereas the mercantile and trade power is perhaps rising. Maybe it is a reflection of that. However, apart from this, most of the temples carry different carvings on their outer surface, which really reflects the contemporary society. But this sort of inferences can be drawn from the architecture, the gradual stages of architecture, and then we can perhaps relate it to the contemporary society's political, religious, social, and economic fluctuations and the relative power conflict. Thank you.
There is a text on the science of building called the Agam Shastra. So, was that text developed before these monuments or afterwards?
It's a very interesting question. We need to know. There is thing is, without a structure, we cannot interpret something. There was a time when the canons were not there. All these canonical texts on architecture and art and sculpture, they start quite late. That is around 5th, 6th century onward. There is nothing beyond, but still, before that also, the temple architecture had begun. The sculptural art had begun. They they have a different set of, so this origin is different, and sometimes we see something and then we try to correlate with idioms, with our thought, with certain interpretations. So literature comes second, I think, and sometimes when a particular literature has been written after, whatever structures they post-date that literature, they are influenced by those texts. So it is a vice versa, relationship.
So, once the text has been written, what could be the reasons for not following the text for a certain period of time? Before the development of another formidable text, they ideally should have followed the text in that region for some period of time. But still we see the changes in the heights of the, see the variations in Gopurams and the Shikharas. So were these texts just meant for, a kind of studying purpose and not for confirmation in the strict sense?
No, they were actually made, they were followed, but to a certain extent, because innovations are taking place every day. Certain things are not defined in canons. Some of the elements are there in architecture which are not defined, their purpose is not defined. Because it has been done for centuries together, certain things are being followed. Few things have certain reasons behind it, but I believe that nothing is without a purpose in our ancient architecture. Everything has got a purpose, whether we know that purpose or not. But so far as texts are concerned, if we conform to the same text, because now at present we have so many texts, so many different texts in North India, South India, East India, everywhere we have got architectural treatises. But some of the temples conform, but next level of innovation is somebody attempts that greater, further, so more elaborations. So that's how these two things go together.
Sir, there are some texts which are used by these
Shilpa Shastra.
So what is the date of those Shilpa Shastra when they were written, which are used by individual Shilpkaris?
They have got different dates. In the earlier Shilpa Shastra is, we can say better, that is after 4th century AD.
So nothing before that?
Nothing before that. Before that, there, as I said, some information can be gleaned from certain other texts like Arthashastra and others which describe things. Sometimes they don't give, they are not architectural treatises, but they refer to something.
How did they decide to worship people in tree? Mango and neem seem to be more useful somehow. On first sight.
It is very difficult to say, but as of now, what we see is people is good for the human beings, and perhaps they learnt it very early and they started doing it. And even today we have got the people mein Brahma ka vas hota hai. So that sort of concepts, when we see the Harappan skills, that reminds us of that. So how they got into it is just to think that they were as ingenious and as knowledgeable as we think we are.
Actually, I happen to read that people generates the most amount of oxygen among all trees.
Yes.
I heard so. So I was actually wondering how somebody may have figured such a thing out in those days, so many centuries.
Our medical sciences were very, very good at the time. I think those treatises are earlier than the architectural treatises. And so they must have got this information. They were actually very wise people.
Yes, that's the answer. The lighter, people like people.
Yes, thank you.
But
Yes.
it's not remarkably Jani, they go for now. Actually, I think it could be the other way around, because in South India, the Gopuram is attached to a particular king, Raja Gopuram
Right.
and all that.
Mhm.
So it could be that the rising Gopuram rather reflects an increasing self-glorification of the kings.
Okay,
In
that's
my
it.
opinion.
Yes.
Whereas the Shikhar, what is called Vimana, not supposed to associate himself with the Gopura.
with the temple.
Shingara or Vimana.
Yes.
So I think it could be rather the other way around.
But when we see it Brideshwar, it is different.
Yes. I think in most cases the gateways are added by kings after major wings.
Right.
And they can find the historic corroboration between wars that are waged by kings, their victory, and they come back and commemorate the victory by adding a new book. Now, this is one thing. The other is the creation of the multiple walls itself. So all the wealth of the country is actually inside the temples. It's stored inside the most valuable things are inside the temple.
Right.
And they also need physical protection from marauders who actually, or other kings who invade it. So each of these prakaras had successively rising gopuras, because you can see that most of them are between 7th and 10th or 11th century.
Gopurams are in certain cases later than even that. They continue up to 15th century.
Most of them, the initial sequence, for instance, Brideshwar has about over 1,000 years.
Yes.
So around the 12th, 13th century onwards, begins to fade the dominance of the Chola kings and their wars. There is a direct correlation between accumulation of wealth
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say
and
here.
the size. There is the deity was quite free from all these external material things which are in the system, and that remained small and sanctified by virtue of its location. So I think also if I could just add the suggestion, at least you seem to view that really trajectory
yes,
through which
because
this has evolved, because there were multiple systems of worship, and you cannot disjunct the typology of the structure from the philosophical and epistemological systems of each forms of worship. So that had a very direct correlation with and their evolution are completely multiple. And the influence of Agama Shastras on early Jain temples is a very significant thing. And a lot of the sourcing that you find in the Hindu temples actually are takeoffs on the early Agama Shastras, which were developed by Jains. So there are, I'm not saying that this is a separate exchange, but there was no real distinction of that sort. And within the same family, one brother could be a Jain, another could be a Buddhist.
The social mobility was quite.
So
Yeah.
all that was possible. So I think it is important to look at the plurality of resources and see how the evolution that we now include are actually through these different plural trajectories.
What about the influence of language that was spoken by the society? I have two questions. One is this, and then the other is there a correlation between the societal structure and how these temples are built? The bigger the temples, maybe they had more disposable cheap labor, you see. So,
To have more labor, to use, you need to have a strong subsistence base, a strong economic base. So that is, society and economics, they go hand in hand. So if you say more labor, that means more mouths to feed, so that much capable economy. So that is a direct correlation between the temple. So, but most of the temples, as we see, they had the royal patronage or were constructed by the kings. So definitely with more economic power, with more temples were constructed, larger temples were constructed. But there is a phase in temple construction. In certain centuries, larger edifices are being constructed, right from Odisha to down south. In north, we don't find many structures surviving, but in all the region, 10th, 11th, 12th centuries are the centuries when very huge edifices are being constructed. In those times, perhaps in those regions, economic progress is quite well. The social component and the rulers are also well off. They have a central authority, very strong central authority. So all these things are related to each other.
so far as language is concerned, what is the relationship, that is very hard to say, and I don't think there is any correlation between that.
Hi guys, something here. I just thought, like once royal power tries to associate itself with religious power, kind of like more sanctity and more authenticity to rule. So that could also lead them to perhaps this time also coincided with the Gothic period, and there was this call to the faithful, and the temples were located at a distance away from cities, and the height of the gopurams, was like a call to the faithful. You could see the gopurams from far. So it could also be these two factors influencing the height of the gopurams versus the height of the.
Certainly, this is a case.
Temples certainly were built on a specific grounds away from the habitation, but temples they attracted the crowd over there, and gradually they turned into temple cities. Even the temple as such, as we all know, this is a cosmos in miniature. So everything is there. So cities develop around it. Even that entire temple complex within the Prakar is the temple Prakar, I think, is called Devpath. So that is the entire divine city in itself. There is all sorts of classes and all. And so far as we said that the heights and other relative issues, okay, there has always been a clash between the rulers and the priesthood. From the Vedic times, this clash between the Brahman and the Kshatriyas has been there. Their relative position, who rules what? One rules the masses through the religious thing, and one is the temporal power. So there is always a clash. So that is perhaps the conflict. When we see the different fluctuations in height, in north, in east, we don't get the prakars. We don't have prakar rising up, but the plinth itself is rising much higher. Even in Chandelas, the plinth is rising very much. In east, the plinth is rising very much. So there is some connection between the spiritual power, the temporal power, and other classes of the society. So it has to be linked with somewhere with these classes and their internal conflicts and relationship.